So we'll start with the first question, which is housing in Nebraska. So obviously there's a big issue of affordable housing as prices for houses have gone up. So what are your plans if elected for governor? Would you do to make housing more affordable here in the state?
There are a couple of solutions that I'm considering for making housing much more affordable in Nebraska. The first one is we need to reconsider zoning in each of the communities to allow for multiple use housing in the areas, apartment complexes or townhouses. Right now, based on zoning, there are areas that you can't build an apartment building based on limited land use. I think that that would be a good solution. It can be much more affordable to people. Like anything, if you build in bulk, it's much less expensive. And depending on what kind of building that the builders create, you can have a reduced rent rate for those individuals. The other idea that I think would be just an incredible idea is our inmates, while they're incarcerated in prison, every single one of them has a job. I think it would be beneficial if we would, out at McCook, there's the work ethic camp out there, and there's a significant amount of land and property in that area that you can add another facility to house additional inmates. And in housing them out there, you can bring in trade skills, have contracts with individual contractors to build modular homes. And that can be a skill, a life skill, a trade skill that the inmates can help produce modular homes. They get paid a wage, but part of that money that those inmates are working goes to restitution for the crime that they committed against society. So you have much more affordable housing being built. And since it's a modular home, then it can be shipped anywhere in Nebraska and put back up in place. And at the same time, you have a double solution there. You're providing trade skills for inmates so that when they get out, they have a skill that they can go to, and they've worked with a reputable contractor as well. And so it's easier for them to get hired. And who knows, at some point, maybe they're the ones who use that affordable housing. I think that would be a good solution. Since the inmates have to work anyway and are already being paid, use them for a service that would help all Nebraskans.
Okay, and a topic that relates to the increase in housing that I've heard a lot of people say is making them almost not feel like they can afford to live in Nebraska or to buy land is property taxes. So if elected for governor, what are your plans to help lower those?
My biggest solution is to reduce spending. We need to conduct an audit on every single state agency to identify redundancies in spending, identify wasteful spending, and cut that out of the budget. We also need to reward every single state agency for not spending money that they don't need to spend. I know when I worked for state government, almost 30 years total, we were told, you spend that money, don't send it back or we won't get that much in our budget next year. And so we searched for things to spend that money on, and that should never happen. Every state agency should be rewarded for not spending that money and returning it back to the state government. So that goes into the general fund and we can use it for other things. And eventually, hopefully there'll be enough money in there that we can eliminate or reduce the inheritance tax or property taxes, use that money to go more towards education instead. I also believe that we need to place caps on spending limits. Everybody, every year, they have a percentage that they get to increase on spending. So I think we need to cap that limit and make sure they don't exceed that and have that extra pool of money in place so that we can utilize it when we need to. There's also the inheritance tax that's in place. And that's killing our farmers, the ag department, the ag area. That money, people need to know where that money goes to first and foremost. That money goes into a discretionary fund for each of the counties to help supplement and support them in the repair of infrastructure that the state doesn't help pay for, or for the repair of machines and equipments that those individual counties have. So we need to find a solution for that as well, to eliminate that inheritance tax so that people want to stay here. I know people have toyed with the consumption tax. I'm not convinced that that is the solution. I am more convinced that we need to reduce our spending. There are a lot of things on the wish list and want list versus the needs, the necessities list that we have to have. And we need to weigh that and consider that before we do anything else.
Okay. Broadband is the third question. And if elected, what are some of the things that you would do to help expand broadband so people who live in rural areas have more easier access to internet?
Mm-hmm. Right now, I know there is a company out there, and it's Starlink. And what it does is there are satellites all blanketed all across the United States, actually across around the entire world. So we need to contact that Starlink system to use the satellite services for connectivity, because that is instant. The satellites are there already. We need to determine how much that would cost to enter into a contract with that company so that we can have instantaneous, without delay or hesitation, internet connectivity. I know people are talking about broadband and using the 5G and bringing dark fiber cable across the state. I want to make sure that we are in front of technology and not behind it. I don't want to spend wastefully and put in all kinds of dark fiber only to have it be obsolete by the time that we need it. Also, for our farmers and ranchers, I know much of the new equipment that they have in place, they can put in GPS coordinates for those things, and the combines and tractors automatically plow the fields, spray. I've also seen aerial sprayers, big drones that they have in place that is also with GPS. And so we need to bring broadband internet connectivity to the entire state as quickly as we can, because that addresses issues of healthcare and agriculture and education and competitive trade globally. So we need it here in the state so that we can compete, that we can educate people, that we can keep individuals safe and healthy, and we can help our farmers.
That leads me, a perfect segue, just segue after segue, to healthcare and access to healthcare in rural areas as well. Some people having to drive more than an hour to see their doctor. So if elected, what are some of the things that you would implement to make healthcare more accessible for people in, say, even the Western state, for example, or the Western side of our state, who have to drive those long distances?
Sure, I've been out there, and there are miles and miles where there is no service at all. And it's important that people have that service. So it goes back to the internet and broadband and connectivity. People can have telehealth calls on many occasions. And so you don't have to go anywhere, especially with the gas prices being high and time. Those are farmers and ranchers, and depending on what's going on, you need to be there in your fields or with your livestock, with your animals, so that you can care for them. You don't have 2 or 3 or 5 hours to just leave. So I think first of all, we can work with internet connectivity to create some telehealth visits for individuals, and only on special occasions do they need to go in to see a primary care physician in person. But general things, mental health, general health, I think that we can do telehealth visits much easier. I would also encourage tuition reimbursement for healthcare workers, for nurses, CNAs, technicians. So if they have some tuition reimbursement and are encouraged to go out to those areas, that may benefit them as well. The thing is, You have to be there and working there in place. And every month, your tuition, your student loan can be repaid. But if you leave, then you don't get that benefit anymore. We can also consider some tax incentives for those individuals, that if you enter into the healthcare field, you may get a bigger tax incentive for being there and being in the rural part of the state. I think also we need to introduce children at an earlier age to the healthcare field. So in middle school and in high school, just introduce it to them. Let the students have some shadowing availability to them and encourage them, say, you know what, if you enter into this field, here are the benefits for tuition reimbursement, but also some tax incentives. If you're willing to work in the human services field and take care of other Nebraskans, you get a reduced rate of taxes on your income tax, or maybe some other area that we could incentivize to get people to enter into healthcare and to stay there. Another thing that might work, I know that firefighters have 3 days on, 4 days off. We might consider shifts like that to help eliminate burnout, just to give people time to decompress. They see some horrible things in the medical field, and so they may be also suffering from PTSD, especially after the COVID. We need to make sure that we give them mental health time and time with their families as well, and just demonstrate to them the importance of them being in our state and helping other Nebraskans, and show that we appreciate them.
Okay. And two more questions for you. So ag producers, if elected, what are some of the things that you would do to help support people in the agriculture part of our economy, farmers, ranchers, stuff like that?
I think one of the, well, multiple things. I really like the Sustainable Beef Project that we have going on in North Platte, Nebraska. And that's a cooperative of local ranchers who said, we want to know where our beef is coming from. We want to have our own processing plants. We want to pay fair market price, and also label our our meat products, whether it's beef or pork, poultry, whatever it is. We want to label it that it is made in Nebraska, and that we certify, not self-certified, but use the USDA food certification, food inspectors, to certify that product coming out of Nebraska. I know when I was a kid, we had our own individualized beef packing plants in York, Nebraska, and the cattlemen, they would put their cattle on the trains and bring them in and sell them at auction. That helps the ranchers know what price they are getting for their beef, and it's more profitable for them. And then it's taken to our own processing plant and sent back out to Nebraska stores. I think that is a good solution for that. I would also work closely with the legislature to identify some tax incentives and breaks for our farmers and ranchers, so that they're not afraid to stay in the position. That also goes back to the inheritance tax and passing the farms and the ranches down to their families when they die. We need to get rid of that inheritance tax. We also need to look at some kind of a solution to reduce the property taxes for our farmers, because it is an unfair burden for them, the amount of taxes they have to pay just because of land ownership. And it's taxed differently based on the type of land it is, the type of soil it is. And with technology today, you can fly a drone over that area and determine what kind of soil content is there, and then tax it based on that. So we need to find a solution to fund our schools better without it just being a burden for property taxes, which weighs unfairly on our farmers and ranchers because of the land they own. I also would work very closely with the Secretary of State, because it is a Secretary of State who works with lowering the tariffs on different products that we export to other nations. So I would encourage more overseas visits to lower those tariffs for our beans, our corn, ethanol, whatever it is, our agricultural products of any kind, so that the tariffs are lower, so we have better trade going on. I know that some farmers grow hemp as part of the CBD for the state of Nebraska. And currently, if that CBD is at 0.3%, it's okay. But if it goes above that, then those farmers are required to destroy that entire crop. I think that's wasteful. I think that we should increase that to 1% so that we can still use the product. The kids are going to go out there, they might pull some off, but they're not going to get high, they're going to get a headache. And we need to realize that and educate people on that product as well, so that farmers don't have to destroy their crops. I think that's it. I think, oh, the other thing is I don't believe we should do the 30-30 project with the federal government. Although many people want to use that and use our farmland and waterways for conservation areas and heritage products, or products areas, we need to consider that once we allow the federal government to make that a conservation area, we can no longer use that land to graze our cattle. We cannot use that land to grow any crops, and we can't use that water for irrigation. So I also want to protect our farmers and ranchers from that as well, and keep Nebraska land in the hands of Nebraska landowners. We do a really good job of conservation of our land and our waterways already. There is a threat at the southern end of the state, I believe with 7 different counties, for a tourism heritage project, which would eliminate use of the land on the Nebraska-Kansas border for use, because it would be in the hands of the federal government, and that's not something that we want to do. I do know that there are some passages of bills, so we have our new canal coming through, and we'll be able to conserve water there as well and help those farmers with reduced rates as they irrigate.
Okay. Finally, why should people vote for you for governor?
People should vote for me for governor because for nearly 3 decades, I have served the state of Nebraska from behind the scenes. I worked in the Department of Corrections for 12 years. I worked in security, I worked in emergency preparedness response, and as a hostage negotiator. And I advised the commander of the best process forward in life and death situations. So when lives truly hung in the balance, I was the advisor to the commander there. From there, I was recruited to the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, where I trained first responders all across Nebraska in mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And also, I helped with the activation of the Strategic National Stockpile when the anthrax scares were in place. We actually had the push pack in Nebraska in undisclosed locations, ready to be dispensed as an antidote if people were exposed to anthrax. I was also part of the creation of the response plan to the H1N1 pandemic, which was a true pandemic where we bought thousands of body bags for every health department across the entire state. I also worked with state agencies on continuity of government and continuity of operations. So if any of our government systems failed, we can continue to operate and serve Nebraskans across the state. From there, I went to work for the Nebraska Department of Education, where I served as the Director of School Safety and Security for the state of Nebraska and helped rebuild school safety plans for all of the schools across the state, updating their safety plans, conducting full spectrum security assessments to identify the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses, identify the threats, and then harden those areas if we needed to. And I trained educators across the state in how to respond to all hazard emergencies, specifically active shooter scenarios, which is what I did in emergency management and corrections too. Trained people on how to respond to mitigate an emergency from taking place, how to respond to it, and keep people alive. So for almost 3 decades now, I have served the state of Nebraska, and I'm currently an adjunct professor at the University of Nebraska in the School of Criminal Justice and Criminology, helping to train young minds how to be better law enforcement officers, just to be aware and helping to mentor them and to create a thin blue line of law enforcement for us. So that's why I have experience all across the board. And that's just my professional work. In my second jobs and third jobs, you know, I've been a banquet waitress. I've donated plasma. I've participated in medical studies. I've been a single mom. I know the struggles. I think that I truly have walked in the shoes of so many others and represent what the bulk of Nebraskans are, which are just regular, hardworking, everyday people with lots of different life experiences. I bring all of those life experience from my personal life and my professional life to the governor's office. I have worked with local, tribal, federal agencies and know how to work with them and coordinate with them in a seamless, coordinated fashion so we can respond to anything. In those positions that I also had, I worked with the budgets. I had budgets for each of those jobs, for the Department of Education, school safety, for the entire state, and how to manage that budget. I was the emergency manager in Grand Island and Hall County, and I had the city county 911 emergency management budget. But then on top of that, I had a Homeland Security grant, a multi-year, multi-million grant that I was balancing that budget as well. So I know how the system works in the state. I know and have seen the flaws and challenges in multiple different areas. I've worked with the Leaders Group, which is the livestock emergency disaster response systems for contagious animal diseases, how to prevent them, how to stop them in place if they enter into Nebraska, what we need to do, how we cull the herds if we need to do that, and where to bury that livestock in the event that we have to kill everything, so it doesn't affect our water supply, both for drinking and any of our water supply. But then above and beyond that, how to manage the mental health of our farmers and ranchers for the loss of everything that they've had. And we've seen that recently in the state with the floods taking place and the loss of farmland and their cattle. I have certifications as a hostage negotiator from the Department of Corrections. I have law enforcement training research and associates from Campbell, California, a certification in emergency preparedness response from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I have certifications in as an emergency manager, as the Professional Development Series of Emergency Management, National Incident Management Systems, Incident Command Systems, Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Programs. I have a bachelor's degree in education from the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and I attended York College and studied the Gospels and the Minor Prophets. I also went to the University of Israel and received certification in advanced homeland security studies, so that when there are larger threats to the state, to the people here, whether it's a chemical or biological agent or a terrorist activity, I know how to respond, how to mitigate, how to observe, how to take care of Nebraskans. So I have a very broad base of experience, and I've been taking care of Nebraskans for a very, very long time. And I simply want to do it. I want to continue to do it, not in the shadows anymore, but step up into the light so everybody can see who's been protecting them and taking care of them and educating them, comforting them, and guiding them for survival so that their lives are better. That would be me.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all the questions I have for you.